Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that means Epic Comic Book Wednesday, when Michael K. Vaughan and I combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about the comic books on which we've wasted our youths. But that time frame, looking back at the comics that have informed us and made us into the super sexy influencers we are today, is inverted in today's Epic Comic Book Wednesday, because today's Epic Comic Book Wednesday is about looking forward, not back. It's about a gigantic comic book reading project that Michael K. Vaughan has taken on for himself, starting at the beginning of this year and going until 2050, 2060, something like that. And it's his comic book reading master plan. And I thought we'd talk about it a little today because it underscores two things that you will know about Michael K. Vaughan if you watch his channel. I'm assuming that everyone who watches my channel watches his channel. Booktubers often say that. If you know about my channel, you must know about so-and-so's channel. But they're mainly doing that as a courtesy or as a reflection of the fact that so-and-so has a bigger subscriber count. So as a way of deference, as a way to defer to an overlap in audience or whatnot. But when it comes to Michael K. Vaughan and me, I think that my assurance of that is greater than usual. I think we have a very great overlap of viewers, the two of us do. And so when you watch his channel, as I assume you do, you will know two things about him. One is that he epitomizes, probably better than anybody in our little corner of BookTube, how much fun reading is. Now, it's not just the pulp stuff that he loves so much. He enjoys every bit as much Herodotus and Thucydides. He enjoys Arthur Conan Doyle, the Sherlock Holmes stories, and also the crappy stuff that Doyle wrote, Bram Stoker's Dracula. But also his pulp trilogy, his pulp trio, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Arthur Conan Doyle, Edgar Rice Burroughs, H.P. Lovecraft, and Robert E. Howard. Loves all of those things and loves them unabashedly. Not worried about anyone thinking that it's dumb or déclassé or anything like that. He underscores a point that I have been making my entire life, which is that reading should be fun. You should find out, your fun should be expanding. You should always be pushing for new areas where you can have fun. But it should be fun. It shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be religion. It should be fun. That's one thing that you'll definitely know if you watch Mike's channel, is that he epitomizes the idea that reading should be fun. And if you watch his channel, the other thing that you will certainly know is that he's quite mad. And if you didn't know that before he talked about this comic book master plan, you'll know it now. So I thought we'd go over his utterly insane master plan and see what we make of it. He wants to read every issue of the founding canon of Marvel Comics, the Stan Lee era of Marvel Comics, the Jack Kirby era, when Jack Kirby created all of these characters with a little help now and then from a mail boy named Stan Lee, who only worked part-time and who chipped in a line of dialogue here, a sound effect there, while Jack Kirby was busy writing, drawing, inking, lettering all of these comic books and also maintaining the elevators, taking the shipments down at the dock, and I think running the lower boroughs of Manhattan, politically, socially, even religiously. No, it was Stan Lee, and Stan Lee was in the perfect position at the perfect time. He was exactly where he wanted to be in order to try something new and see if it would work. And it did. To put it mildly, it did. The Marvel Comics era was born. And it changed comic books completely, and it kept changing comic books completely, and it ultimately gave rise to a $1 trillion movie industry. So Stan Lee lived long enough to see his vision of Marvel Comics completely vindicated in a broader audience, which is the thing that he always said it could do. That, sure, I love comic book fans, and these are all for you comic book fans, and I will answer as many letters from you comic book fans as I can, but the whole world would like these stories if the whole world could see them. And thanks to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the whole world did like them. But Mike is going to read every issue of the canonical Marvel Comics. So not the predecessor to Marvel Comics from World War II, but the comics that were launched in the early 60s. He's going to run He's going to read the whole of all of those canonical characters until all of their comics were canceled. That first volume of their runs was canceled decades later. And he's already started with Thor, 2020 Thor. He's already started with reading every issue of Thor. And the problem that you're going to have with reading every issue of these founding characters is twofold. One is that, of course, if you've got to put out a monthly or a bi-monthly issue, you're going to put out duds. That's just going to happen. Trust me, I know that. I've been the victim of monthly and bi-monthly deadlines for literary stuff before, and you can't always bring your A game. You just can't do it. People cancel at the last minute. People turn in bad work, and there's no time to get better work. You spent your money already, or you've already allotted the time, or the printer's waiting with the truck down in the lorry or whatnot. They're going to be duds. And if you're going to read every issue, well, then you're going to encounter lots of duds. Thor, for instance, has had some great periods, long, extended periods where it's a terrific book to read. I read Thor from the very beginning until that first run was canceled. All of those decades, every issue. And there were a lot of longueurs, a lot of points where I was willing to jump ship. I just couldn't do it. As one old friend of mine said a long time ago, you just can't turn your back on the big guy in the red cape, no matter who he is, no matter which he is for which company. The other drawback to doing this, to reading every issue of the Marvel canon, is that some of Stan Lee's canonical creations are better than others. Thor, for instance, was a terrible creation at the beginning. He was just a ripoff of Captain Marvel. Hokey, gimmicky, until Stan Lee realized, well, I could lean into this whole Norse god thing, and that might produce something that has never been done before, something that's totally unique to comics. And he was right. He did that, and he was right. And Thor has more or less remained that mythological being ever since, solely to his benefit. Thor is a great Marvel character because he can't be reduced to a gimmick. He could, in his original Journey into Mystery days, he could be reduced to a gimmick. He's a brightly colored superhero who turns into a mortal being if he lets go of his hammer for more than 60 seconds. So there's a clock going all the time. Same gimmick that you get with Billy Batson or Our Man or whatnot. A kind of super identity gimmick. Once Thor started moving beyond that, he became incredibly complex, an incredibly complex Marvel character. He is royalty, he's divinity, he has a human side. He's interesting on his own. It doesn't so much matter anymore that he has a gimmick or not, which is why later writers on Thor decided to just get rid of the gimmick, because it's not necessary anymore. It's not anything anyone even cares about anymore, so let's just get rid of it. So when it comes to Thor, Mike is on pretty strong ground. He is then going to do Captain America. And this will be Tales of Suspense, where Captain America had one half of the issue. And then, once he got his own book, Captain America, which Mike says goes from issue number 100 to issue number 454. And Captain America is also, first of all, he's a holdover from the World War II era. Jack Kirby and Joe Simon created Captain America. Stan Lee had the inspired idea of just bringing him back and putting him in the 1960s instead of in the 1940s, and making that part of his dramatic arc. And that is interesting. That is nuanced. Captain America is a man out of time. He's a man for many decades. When Stan Lee was handling him, he was a man who was also mourning his time and mourning his dead partner, but who embodies a kind of pure righteousness that Stan Lee, he didn't harp on this, but he nevertheless puts it in Captain America, embodies a kind of pure righteousness that seems to be gone from the world. Stan Lee was a real great writer of stand-up, square-jawed, heroic characters. But they live in a compromised world. They live in a world where Stan Lee could see the 60s coming. Long before they got there, he could see the 60s coming. And don't get me wrong, he enjoyed the heck out of the 60s. But he also saw the turmoil and the dark side of it. And he keeps Captain America free of that. When the world gets too dark, Captain America simply puts aside his identity as Captain America. He doesn't just salute his way through it. He's directly responding to that kind of darkness in society. That isn't a gimmick. That isn't just a guy with a shield. That is so much more interesting. That is not going to stay true for all of the picks on this list. But it is true for the next one. Because the next one was forever and ever Marvel's signature character, Spider-Man, which started out in Amazing Fantasy and then moved on to his own book, and then another book, and then another book, reprints like crazy. Spider-Man was a phenomenon. Those of you who are not old enough, when you think of Phenomenon and Marvel Comics in the same thought, you will either, if you're very young, you'll think of Deadpool. If you're not quite as young, you'll think of Wolverine or the X-Men. But you won't think of Spider-Man, but Spider-Man was a phenomenon. An absolute phenomenon. And a fascinating, nuanced character. Stan Lee made him a teenager who gets... all of these characters, almost all of them, get their powers from radiation of some kind or other. Even Captain America, who gets his powers originally from a super soldier serum. But when Stan Lee decides to rewrite his origin, he adds radiation to it. But he had a thing about radiation. But I would argue that there's even a case to be made that in the very first appearance of Thor, it's radiation from the hammer that is changing Dr. Donald Blake into Thor. But I could be wrong about that. But Spider-Man? Definitely. He's bitten by a radioactive bug. A radioactive arachnid. Sorry, not a bug, but an arachnid. And he gains superpowers. They aren't amazing. They aren't amazing superpowers. We're told that he has the proportional speed and strength of a spider. That isn't true. But he gains a super strength, super speed, a weird precognitive ability, his spider sense that allows him to sense danger, and that combined with his heightened speed allows him to basically dodge bullets. He's not actually fast enough to dodge a bullet, but if his spider sense warns him ahead of time, then he can. That's why he manages to live so long in the gunfire of the mafia in New York City. He gains these powers and immediately decides to cash in on them, which is just pure Stan Lee. He decides to cash in on his powers, to be a masked performer, making lots of money, going on TV. It's just fantastic. We in the 21st century, we undersell how great an approach that was, and it's not a kid doing this. It's a teenager. Peter Parker is not a child. He's old enough to know better. And he's become arrogant and complacent until a cop is chasing a criminal past him and says, "Hey, grab that guy." And he says, "What's in it for me? Why should I bother? Why should I get involved?" And later, that same criminal kills his beloved Uncle Ben. Amazing. A moment so dramatic that it gives Spider-Man eyeballs. And that changes him. Pure Stan Lee magic. That changes him. He's still an awkward teenager. He's still going to high school. He still has his Aunt May to care about. But he has a motivation to do right. He is suddenly consumed with the desire to do right, to live up to his Uncle Ben's motto, the most famous thing that Stan Lee ever wrote: "With great power comes great responsibility." So Spider-Man becomes not only a textured, nuanced character, but one of the very few characters in this original lineup that has a reason to do what he does. Thor, I guess you could say he has a reason. He's fond of the planet Earth and tells bad guys that it's under his protection. Captain America, of course, has duty. He has a duty, and it is expanded over the years to encompass just fighting evil. Spider-Man also has a motivation. He's haunted by the good that he didn't do, by the one act he didn't do. And that's wonderful. And Spider-Man also, like Thor, has a great run. That's 300 issues, 400 issues. But there are very few truly bad parts in that run. Partially that's a matter of just pragmatics. Spider-Man was the flagship of Marvel Comics. Good talent tended to go there. Whereas if you're a backup feature, maybe not. Maybe you get George Tuska instead. Mike always hates it when I bash on George Tuska, but nevertheless, you know you're in trouble. If Jack Kirby isn't doing your Captain America backup feature anymore, instead it's George Tuska, you know you're in trouble. And I don't think Tuska ever drew Spider-Man for his own book. Instead, Spider-Man had Steve Ditko to start for the artwork, who was incredibly distinctive, and then he got John Romita Sr., who just grew into the character until he was absolutely iconic as an art brand for Spider-Man. Now, John Romita Sr.'s son, John Romita Jr., also became one of the greatest Spider-Man artists of all time and has had a number of runs, including one just recently, where the artwork is just amazing. I think, just amazing. I don't agree with the critics that say that John Romita Jr. has gotten sloppy with age. I don't see that at all. Inventive, sure. Experimental, sure, but not sloppy. And there was also a long run that I think is underrated by an artist named Ross Andru. I think the Ross Andru era on Spider-Man is really, really good. But Michael K. Vaughan is going to have very few dry spots in reading through Spider-Man in 2035 when he finally gets to it. That can't be said for the next item on the list, which is Iron Man. He is reading Tales of Suspense. Iron Man was the other star of Tales of Suspense. And then Iron Man number 1 to number 332, plus the annuals. And Iron Man, as I don't need to tell you because of the success of the aforementioned Marvel Cinematic Universe, is Tony Stark, who is a wealthy industrialist. He's in an accident. He's fatally injured in an accident overseas and needs to build his own life support system, and decides to expand on that life support system. The system that will keep his heart beating will also be the power source for a gigantic suit of armor, a superpowered suit of armor. And he keeps refining that armor over the years. It added an element to Iron Man that you didn't get in many other superhero comics, is that he changes his costume on a regular basis as the armor gets more and more refined. Sometimes ridiculous, other times not. And decides to fight evil. Okay, where did that come from? I don't know. I don't know. You're asking the wrong person. Okay, sure. Tony Stark is a tech guy, an industrialist, a weapons manufacturer. He develops a suit of armor, a revolutionary suit of armor, nothing like it in the world. And, okay, great. Why does he tell the world that the Iron Man is his bodyguard? First of all, why would he tell the world that when they're never seen together? What kind of a bodyguard is that? But also, why would he fight evil at all? I have no idea. It's never explained. And Iron Man has had a lot of dull, horrible patches, and Michael K. Vaughan he's resigned to reading them all. It's going to kill him. Then we move on, but we don't move far. Iron Man doesn't get his powers from radiation. He gets his powers from shrapnel. But Daredevil is the next character on the list, and he does get his powers from radiation. He shouldn't. He shouldn't at all. And one of the prevailing theories put forward by a much later Marvel Comics writer that I really like is that all these people are mutants. And that the radiation is triggering a mutation. That's why it doesn't happen to anyone else. I kind of sort of like that. Daredevil's origin story is that as a boy he sees a blind man crossing the street. The blind man doesn't see a truck headed towards him. The truck is full of radioactive slosh in barrels that aren't well welded shut. He springs into action. He saves the blind man, but some of the radioactive glop hits him in the eyes and blinds him. So it's not a mother with a child crossing the street. It's a blind man crossing the street, and he is blinded. And the radiation causes him to have extremely heightened senses, and it also gives him a radar sense, an additional sense. He can't see, but he can map the world around him with his radar sense, and he can hear and smell and taste and all 10 times better than anyone. And that happens when he's a boy. And then he loses his father, and he goes to law school, and he gets his degree, and he becomes a practicing lawyer. He is called to the bar in New York City, and puts on skin-tight leotards to fight crime. Why? Why would he do that? In the first issue of Daredevil, he puts on that costume in order to hunt down his father's killers. And he does. Why would he do anything else after that? Why wouldn't he just confine his battles against evil to the courtroom, where his father wanted him to do it, where he's suited to do it? Where would he ever even find the time to fight crime if he's a practicing lawyer? It doesn't make any sense. And also, how would he fight crime? He's just a guy. He's just a guy in his pajamas. How could he fight crime? It's true. He has this radar sense. It's not really going to help you against a tank. But he does anyway. And Mike is going to read him, number 1 all the way to number 380. And, of course, there are good time periods in there. I was very pleased. Daredevil was my introduction to an artist called Gene Colan. And I was very pleased by what I saw. Gene Colan, I don't know what he did to the powers that be at Marvel. I don't know what deal he made, but he got the ability to do all kinds of big experimental action sequences that really eat up the page. And under Stan Lee's control of Marvel Comics, he wanted to get his money's worth for what he was paying his artist by the page. So he didn't want every other page to be half a whole page of just one panel. Kind of thought it was lazy. I don't believe he ever actually said that in an interview, but he kind of thought that was lazy. And Gene Colan got away with it. And so his Daredevil issues are terrific, even though he's not really a superhero guy, as we're going to see. He came and went from Daredevil, but there were others. Bob Brown did some wonderful and, again, underrated work on Daredevil in the artwork. And, of course, the pinnacle of Daredevil is Frank Miller, who came on as the writer and the artist for the book and made it an institution. Did one of the greatest runs of any comic book in history. That had even me eagerly reading Daredevil every month. But it's still really boring. It's just a guy. It's just a guy in porn spandex. So Mike's going to get his way through it, but maybe he will move around some of the stuff on this list so that the interesting stuff is first, in case, he croaks. Like, for instance, I skipped one right at the beginning, and that's the Fantastic Four. I do believe they are next on his list, which is great. That postpones the evil day when he will be forcing himself to read every Iron Man issue that's ever been written. Fantastic Four, he's going to read from number 1 all the way to number 416. Of course, Fantastic Four number 1 ushered in the Marvel Age of Comics. And I have already done my bit. I did a classic bit on this channel about how dumb the first issue of Fantastic Four is, how dumb their origin story is. It's really, really dumb. In fact, there's no part of it that's salvageable. It's just awful from beginning to end. But it isn't simple. It isn't just a gimmick. These people, these 4 people who are in the team, they know each other. They are related to each other. They're friends with each other, longtime friends with each other. They know each other. They have a shared history. I firmly believe that the Fantastic Four would have been every bit as interesting a comic book experience in the hands of the right artist and the right writer if Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Sue Storm, and Johnny Storm never got superpowers. If we just followed their life story, I believe that would have been almost as interesting as the adventures they got when they did get superpowers. But they did get superpowers. They were exposed to, say it with me now, radiation. And it gave them superpowers, but not the same superpowers. Each one has different superpowers. And they become Marvel Comics' first super team. And because you have that dynamic, that interpersonal family dynamic, and also because they didn't intend to be superheroes, none of them envisioned this as their life at all. That adds a built-in nuance that is not gimmicky. It's not, will they get to their hammer in time not to turn into a nerdy doctor? It's not, I was a guy, now I put on armor. Now I'm a guy in armor. It's not that. Instead, it's interesting. It's really interesting anyway, just inherently. And Stan Lee knew it, because the Fantastic Four, oh my, almost no bad runs anywhere in the whole history of the book. And some classic runs as well. The Lee Kirby run on Fantastic Four. Once they got their feet underneath them, once they got to Galactus, it became epic. It became incredible. But Roy Thomas and John Buscema did a great run as well. Ross Andru did some really good work on Fantastic Four, and even John Byrne. I'm no big John Byrne fan, but when he came on as the writer and artist for Fantastic Four, he did an era that fans remember well. They really love it. I remember it well and love it myself. So Mike has a lot of good reading in store there, but that's not true for everybody. Because the next thing we have on the list is the Hulk. Mild-mannered scientist Bruce Banner, who is caught at Ground Zero in the firing range of an experimental gamma bomb. Radiation again. And it doesn't kill him. It doesn't kill him. Instead, it transforms him, some of the time, into a brute. At the beginning, a Jekyll and Hyde type transformation, where the Hulk is a sentient being. He's brutal, but he's not monosyllabic. And he's gray, and he's powerful, but he's not infinitely powerful. The radiation takes time to build in him. That is the story in Marvel Comics continuity. And as it builds, it erodes the Hulk's intelligence. So that for the longest time, the Hulk, when he is a giant green rage monster, isn't really coherent. He doesn't say much more than puny humans or Hulk will smash or whatnot. Manages to just go on adventure after adventure after adventure. Of course, since the giant green Hulk is not really adult, not really cognizant, there's no heroism. He's not fighting crime. He's fighting back against people who pick on him. Inexplicably became popular with fans. I don't get it at all. He's not an interesting character. It's not an interesting concept. And after a while, for a long while, it was matched with the single worst artist in the history of comic book art. And yet, the Hulk has been popular. Just nonstop. Not as popular as his big fans like to think that he is, but still popular. And Michael K. Vaughan is going to have to read all of this crap. Good Lord. Then we get to Doctor Strange, who's another interestingly nuanced character, where the nuances are built into his character. The Hulk, mild-mannered guy, turns into a rage monster. Iron Man, ordinary guy, puts on a suit of armor. Daredevil, ordinary guy, gets extra senses. Doesn't have any reason to fight crime, doesn't have any desire to fight crime. Iron Man shouldn't have any desire to fight crime. The Hulk doesn't even know what crime is. He's half the time creating the crime himself. But Doctor Strange is different. Doctor Strange is more interesting. An arrogant surgeon in New York who has a car accident and loses the ability, the fine motor control in his hands. So he can't be an arrogant surgeon anymore. And it devastates him. It's all that he ever imagined. And it devastates him. And he goes wandering the world and eventually goes to the mystical East and learns sorcery from the Ancient One, from an old mysterious sorcerer. Learns it in part alongside the Ancient One's other pupil, Baron Mordo, who, as you can tell from his name, is evil. You would ordinarily be able to tell in Marvel Comics in those early formative days that he's evil because he has a goatee, but Doctor Strange also has facial hair. He and Iron Man have facial hair. And again, a much later comic book writer has posited that since magic has to be just an alternate kind of energy, in the Marvel Comics universe is science-based, it's rational, so magic has to be another kind of energy that just most people don't have any access to. Again, this writer said, well, Stephen Strange's accident triggered a mutation that allows him to do this. And some people have that mutation, but most people don't. Whether or not you think that way, Doctor Strange starts having mystical adventures. He's definitely part of the Marvel Universe. It doesn't take long for Stan Lee to connect him with the Marvel Universe, at least a little, from his house on Bleecker Street. But he has a long run. He was one of the two books that Stan Lee got Steve Ditko to draw at the beginning. And the Ditko years on Doctor Strange are superb. They're amazing. And then Doctor Strange had other adventures as well. He's tends to do well on relaunches, and sometimes he has long stretches that are really good, including my favorite, which involves the artist Gene Colan, who here is given something much more conducive to his drawing talents than a guy in spandex for Daredevil. Much more conducive. And his issues of Doctor Strange are classic stuff. Just amazingly good. Aided by the inking of Tom Palmer, who also did such a great job inking Gene Colan on the comic book that perfectly captures his talents, Tomb of Dracula, which is not on Mike's list because it's not a canonical Marvel superhero. But Doctor Strange, he's going to do, you've got Strange Tales, where Doctor Strange starred. Then he got his own book, and then he got his own book again, and then he got his own book a third time. And I think he's on the fourth or fifth incarnation now. But Michael K. Vaughan, for this master plan, he is not doing any Marvel Comics now. He's taking him only up until Heroes Reborn screwed the pooch for all of this stuff. So, and in that run, those different incarnations of Doctor Strange, he's going to have a lot of great stuff to read. I can't wait. I hope I'm still alive when he finally gets to the Gene Colan era that I'm talking about, because I'd love to hear his thoughts on it. Just love to. Then we finish up for this master plan, this insane master plan, with two titanic items. First, the Avengers. 400 issues of the Avengers. Now, I did my routine as well on the first issue of the Avengers on this channel, and I had a blast doing it. And you were all scandalized and you clutched your pearls. Most of you recognize that although I was ripping Avengers #1 to small pieces, I still love Avengers. Most of you recognize that. And it's Marvel's super team that usually gathers a lot of their most powerful characters who are not otherwise affiliated with teams and has them fight evil. Again, the motivations are a little sketchy here. The mechanics a little sketchy here. Why would these people do this when none of them are cut out for it? Why would they do it? I could understand maybe some of Marvel's universe's less powerful superheroes banding together into a team, but this team had the Hulk, it had Thor. Why would they do that? The first, I don't know, even 20, 30, 50, 100 issues of the Avengers, the team never faces an adversary of any kind that Thor could not beat on his own. But nevertheless, it was fun to see. And it became a really popular Marvel title. Those 400 issues have some great periods in them. Just fantastic. Including, I know I bashed George Tuska, but including a long period by an artist named Don Heck, who I think is underrated. I think he's really, really good. Unfortunately, I was reading the Avengers right from the beginning, and I was really enjoying it, even though I remember, I've mentioned on this channel, I remember vividly my reaction to one particular moment when I suddenly knew what the Stan Lee virus really was in comics. Because the Wasp, a member of the original Avengers, is shot. Not by a ray gun, but just shot by a henchman with a gun and may die. This is the first time anything like that had ever happened in a comic book, and I remember thinking about that. I think the friend that I went on and on to about has long since died, so at least he gets relief from that. But I still love the Avengers, and I loved it more the more chances they took and the grander it got. I was reading the book, and I was really enjoying it when it was announced that Gene Colan, the artist Gene Colan, was coming on the book as an artist, and I thought, a team book of superheroes? It's not going to work all that well, and it didn't. It didn't work all that well, and then he went, and a whole bunch of other artists came on board and left, and had some great, great times. And then it was announced much, much later, decades later, that Gene Colan was coming back as artist on the Avengers. I don't know what kind of payola happened to make that happen, but it was abysmal. It was just abysmal. I wanted it to be over. It was the weirdest thing, because I felt the same thing. He also, late in his career, got a gig on Wonder Woman that wasn't going to work. I knew it before I saw the first issue, that it wasn't going to work. It's just, I don't know if it was him, or if it was that Marvel just wanted somebody they could absolutely depend on, but it wasn't right at all, and it didn't work. But largely, the Avengers have had some really great periods, and they have a ton of those paperback Epic Collection reprints. So Mike's got a ton of issues to work with. It's going to take a long time to read those issues. And then finally, we'll finish up with the X-Men. The later phenom, the thing that took off after Spider-Man, that took the crown from Spider-Man. Because Chris Claremont and Dave Cockrum pitched a newly revitalized X-Men team and a revitalized X-Men concept to the powers that be at Marvel Comics, who said, who gives a crap? Do whatever you like. Funny books. And it was hugely successful. Hugely successful. The all-new, all-different X-Men was an enormous success. Claremont invented a couple of characters. He brought a couple of characters from other places in Marvel's continuity. Banshee, who had been an X-Men villain. Wolverine, who had showed up in an issue of the Hulk. He brought these people together, added in a few of the original team members, and created magic. Just magic. And that magic was amplified exponentially when the art changed from Dave Cockrum, who I love, to John Byrne. When Claremont and Byrne did the X-Men, suddenly, words cannot convey how incredibly popular that was. And it put the X-Men on the map. It made them an institution. I have had strong points since then, but they've also been a mess. Marvel doesn't want to muck with their continuity, so it's just continuity on top of continuity. detail on top of detail on top of detail, so that no matter how many times they relaunch the X-Men, there is, in fact, today, when I'm recording this video, is New Comic Book Day. That's why Mike and I chose Wednesdays. And there is an X-Men #1 coming out to the stands today. But it's a direct handoff from a previous era of the X-Men. Tons and tons of insider knowledge. There's no way that it's going to function as a genuine #1 introducing anybody to this team. No way is that going to happen. It'll be incomprehensible to people who haven't read the X-Men carefully, Talmudically, for the last 10 years. Which is not what you want in that first issue. but it doesn't matter, because Mike's not going to get that far. He's reading all the way to 544 of the X-Men. So he will go through bleak periods. He will go through the revival period, the all-new, all-different X-Men. He'll go through that period. Giant-Size X-Men #1. I remember how amazing that was. I thought, I really like Cockrum's artwork. I really, really do. So I'll read this, definitely. Oh, and what you're going to... Oh, so you're going to revive the monthly X-Men comic? Okay. Well, I love Cockrum's artwork, so I'll definitely do it. And then a character dies. A team member dies. And I thought, oh, okay. So you've been given a lot different permission here than normally when someone relaunches a book in Marvel Comics. You've been given permission to do things with this book. You're going to do things with this book. And Claremont kept on doing that. He kept on doing things with the book, so it became a real reading experience. And the X-Men also doesn't suffer quite so much from the motivational failures of some of these other characters. Why would Doctor Strange involve himself? He has mystical adventures. Why would he involve himself in anything else? And Daredevil, Iron Man, the Hulk, why? There is no answer to why. Even the Avengers, there is no answer to why. But the X-Men have a ideological framework. They are brainwashed by a zealot named Charles Xavier, the world's most powerful telepath, who has a vision. He has Xavier's dream, where mutants and normal humans will live side by side in peace and understanding. And Xavier views that mutant menaces, evil mutants like Magneto or the Blob, are in the way of that dream. And it makes a certain symmetry to have mutants fight them and show humans that there are good mutants who will help them. That's pretty solid. That at least is a mission. That is a mission that makes sense. What is the Avengers mission? I've never understood that. I've never understood that at all. The Fantastic Four, sure, you could say that they never stop being explorers, so they run into trouble. The Avengers, I don't know what their mission is, but the X-Men have a mission. They used to. They don't anymore. Their mission now is to gender swap each other and eat and talk about eating. But for a long time, for 400 issues, they did have a mission, which is to protect a world that hates and fears them. And that mission was shaped by Charles Xavier. So that makes sense. There's a lot of good reading there. A lot of good reading. Even the original Lee Kirby years of X-Men get better as they go along before they disappear completely and before there's the ever-looming threat of George Shuska. And, of course, there's a period there where Neil Adams is doing the artwork. Pretty impressive stuff, even now. So, there you go. That is Michael K. Vaughan's master plan for reading the canonical Marvel Comics all the way to the end of their initial number. Which is insane. So, I made this video as a camaraderie to my Epic Comic Book Wednesday compadre, but don't expect me to do this. Not a chance. Not a chance in the world. The closest I might come would be to read, for instance, real comic books. Every issue of Adventure Comics, from the first all the way to the end. Every issue, every appearance of the Legion of Superheroes. Sure. Even the Justice League. But Marvel? No. No. I'm not going to read every issue of Iron Man, good lord. But it'll be fun to watch him slowly lose what shreds of sanity he still possesses. So we'll all watch together. We'll have a ringside seat as he gives us updates. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.